There are 3 questions that you need to know the answer to if you want to get better at the skill of turning your dreams into reality. I call this power, the ability to work with reality, to close your eyes, picture an idea of how you want the world to be, and then go about the process of turning that dream into actual reality. And the reason I'm making this video is because I've been asking myself these 3 questions over and over and over again. And the more clarity I get on the answers to these questions, the more powerful I get, the better I am able to make things happen, to actually change the world to the way that I want it to be. Enough of an intro. Question number 1, what do I want? This is huge. You need to have an idea of where you're trying to get to if you want to get there. You know, you can't just, your dreams aren't going to happen unless you're very clear on what your dreams actually are first. But there's a couple traps that come into this. First of all, there's this thing called mimetic desire, where you want the same things that the people around you want. This is a trait that happens with all humans, and I'm sure it was programmed into us through evolution. So ask yourself the question, what do you want? And if the answer to that question is the same thing that almost everybody around you has, you want the same things that the people closest to you want, then chances are that's not what you actually want. It's just what the people around you want. I'm in Australia and these birds are crazy. In the UK we should have pigeons and seagulls. In Australia there's all sorts of parrots and stuff. It's cool. Anyway, so what do you want? Mimetic desire. Do you want the same things that the people around you want? If you do, then watch out, it's probably a trap. You probably don't actually want those things. The second trap is that nowadays we're told what we should want, which means that we set goals that aren't really what we want, but it's what we think that we should want. A huge example of this is we've been told that we should be good. So if you ask someone, what do you want? They say, I want to change the world. But when it comes down to it, that's not their core desire, or at least it's not for the vast majority of people. And you can see this because when you look at their actions, every single action they take isn't towards that goal. Every single action they take isn't selfless, it's often selfish. And oftentimes when people are selfless, that's actually just them being selfish. They're just pretending that they're selfless to look good. It's a status thing, but in reality they want to feel good. They want to feel the pleasurable feelings that they get from being selfless, and they want to appear to be someone that's selfless. Anyway, that is a common example. So if you start saying, I want this thing, is that really what you want, or is it just what you've been told that you should want? I was told that I should want to go to university. Now looking back, that was a bad idea. There's all sorts of these things that we're told that we should want. The way you get around this is by just being less attached to what other people say. You know, we're grown up in a society and we think that the society has the best interests for us, and often it doesn't. And often the people closest to us don't have the best interests for us as well. So you just have to take a step away, either physically and spend more time alone, or at least just become less attached to what the people around you want and what the people that you look up to tell you that you should want. You really have to start to think for yourself on that. So that's the first question, what do you want? If you get very, very clear on what you want, then it's far easier to go about the process of turning your dream situation into reality, because you actually know what your dream process is. You know, you don't waste time going in the wrong direction. You know exactly where it is you're trying to head to, and you can be efficient. All of the actions you do can be towards that objective. So what do you want? Spend time figuring out this question. Number 2, and by the way, that's extrinsic motivation. What you want and what you really want is extrinsic motivation. Often that's a vehicle enough to be motivation to drive you towards action. Number 2 is intrinsic motivation. What do you enjoy doing? What do you like doing? This is a really important question, because yeah, extrinsic motivation can often be a driver to get people to do things. Like for me, when I was trying to reach financial freedom, I didn't have intrinsic motivation for every single part of the process. There was a huge part of the process I didn't enjoy, but because my extrinsic motivation, my desire was so strong, I did it anyway, even though I didn't enjoy the process. So if you have a really strong desire for something, then you actually don't need intrinsic motivation. You can just do it anyway. But for most people, they don't have a really, really strong desire for something in specific, so you need intrinsic motivation, and intrinsic motivation is huge. Intrinsic motivation is finding what you enjoy doing, and this is massive because say you want a 6-pack. Most people say they want a 6-pack, but they don't really want a 6-pack enough to do the things necessary to get the 6-pack. They think they want a 6-pack, but what they actually want is the pleasurable feelings they get when they eat a donut instead of getting the 6-pack. They don't want it enough to force themselves to go to the gym even when they're tired. So the way you get around this, if your extrinsic motivation isn't high enough, is you rely on intrinsic motivation, which is what do you enjoy doing? Because you can get a six-pack if you happen to find a sport that you love doing and you just want to play it for the sake of playing that sport, but the byproduct happens to be getting a six-pack. That's great. You get a six-pack and you get it in a way where you love the process. You're doing the things that you enjoy to do. So intrinsic motivation is huge. And the closer and the more aware you become of what you enjoy doing, the better things are, because it's easier to stick with things in the long run. Most people say they start a podcast. They start a podcast for extrinsic motivation reasons. They want to grow an audience, for example. But what happens is that it takes longer than they expect to grow an audience. And because they don't really enjoy the process of creating a podcast, they stop before they actually reach the podcast. Whereas if they had intrinsic motivation, if they enjoyed the podcast process of creating a podcast just for the sake of creating a podcast, then they're going to stick with it for ages, long enough in order to actually get the results. So the clearer you get on what you like, the better. And the way you get this is basically just by experimenting lots of different things and becoming aware of how your energy is impacted when you do certain things. When you do activity X, is your energy higher or lower than it was before you did activity X? For example, recording these videos gives me more energy than it takes from me. So that's something that I'm intrinsically motivated to do. I enjoy the process of standing here with a camera and documenting some of the thoughts that go on in my mind. Third question, what should you do? And what you should do is basically, the dream situation is you find activities, you find a way to fill your time where you're intrinsically motivated to do the activities, and the intrinsically motivated activities lead to your extrinsic goals. This is the dream situation. Here you have the desire of reaching your extrinsic goals to carry you through the parts of the process that you don't really enjoy. But you can fall back on your intrinsic motivation, the fact that you actually enjoy the activities to get things done. And if you get really good at answering these three questions and you're able to find the overlap between intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation, and you're able to do those things regularly, it's really quite remarkable how much you can change the world to a way that you want it to be. We've seen a few humans in history that have completely shaped the way that we all view reality, the phone that I'm holding at the moment, the philosophy that we have, the speech that we use, all of these sorts of things were manipulated by just a handful of really, really powerful human beings. And I think that the power that you have is far greater than you actually believe it to be true. And the way that you start to acquire that power, the way you start to acquire the skill of manipulating your dream into reality, is getting good at answering these three questions, which is a process that I'm in the process of doing. And I hope you enjoy this video.